What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
Our guest on this episode of Educate Everyone is Marybeth Gasman. She's the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Endowed Chair in Education and a distinguished professor at Rutgers University. She's a leading scholar on historically black colleges and universities and equity in higher education, and has authored or edited over 35 books and written hundreds of scholarly and public articles. She's recognized as one of the most influential education scholars in the U.S.
So, Marybeth, thank you so much for being here. Then, can you just tell us a little more about what you do and who you are and why you do it?
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I am a professor at Rutgers University, and I'm a historian by training. I do work related to race and class in America. And I also serve as the executive director of the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions, as well as the Proctor Institute for Leadership, Equity, and Justice. So I wear several hats, but I really, really love all of them.
And what exactly does that institute do?
The Proctor Institute is focused on big issues in research and practice related to leadership, equity, and justice, mainly pertaining to education, but I would say pretty broadly. I mean, we're very open to many different things, and we love to support people and bring them opportunities. And then the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions, which is 11 years old. Proctor Institute is 6, but the Center for Minority Serving Institutions is focused on doing work, both practice and research, with the nation's nearly 1,000 colleges and universities that are classified as minority serving institutions. And we've been doing that for a long time and get really, really excited about bringing opportunity to institutions that really do like the lion's share of the work when it comes to low-income students, first-gen students, students of color, lots of veterans, and just, really interesting group of students that are all over the country. So that's the kind of work we do with both of those organizations.
Okay, and so you've been doing that since its inception. Have you been at the helm there?
Yes, I created the Center for Minority Serving Institutions, and I created the Proctor Institute. And that's one of the things that I really love about being a faculty member, is that you can dream things up and you can have a life where you teach and do research, or you can have a life where you teach, do research, and dream up anything and everything big and roll it out and make it happen and work with people. And I really, really love to collaborate with people and to create opportunity. I came from a very poor family, and my mother, has about an 8th grade education, and my father had a GED. And for me, creating opportunity for others, like was created for me, is what motivates me. So it brings me immense joy.
You said something there that kind of resonated with me, because I think one of the big criticisms that higher academia gets is that it's all about concepts and ideas and in the classroom stuff, none of which really pertains to the real world.
It's interesting because I think now more than ever you're sort of hearing things like that. But what I would say is that as somebody who came from a situation, I was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I lived most of my life sort of in a very, very rural community. And higher education completely changed my life. It also changed the life of my daughter. It changed the life of my mother once I was educated. And my mother's 94. So I've been able to provide all kinds of things for my mom through being educated. And one of the things I'll say is that I was a political science major, and people could probably say, well, how do you use that? Well, you use that by understanding what democracy is. You understand your vote. You understand how bills are made, laws are made, the Supreme Court works, right? You understand all of these things. So even though I was reading maybe political philosophy or I was reading political scientists in my major, all of it is completely relevant. And my PhD with a focus in history, all of that right now, I'm so glad that I'm a historian because I understand when people are telling me a story that isn't true because I read extensively in history. And so I think more than ever, people should be paying attention in classrooms and asking critical questions. I think that's incredibly important. One thing I was going to say about this is that I think that there are a lot of people that think that faculty teach students what to think. And that is not what the vast majority of faculty do. What they do is they teach people to think critically. So that's not teaching people what to think. That's teaching people how to think, like how to be a critical consumer of information. And I am so glad that I learned that skill, and I am happy to pass that on to students.
So then why do you think so many people do have that perception of what goes on in a college classroom? I've spent a lot of time in college classrooms on both sides of the desk, as it were. And I'd like to think that I also got a lot out of my education and all the years that I was there. My mother similarly told me that you can get everything taken away from you in life except your education, except what you know, and being in a classroom, again, kind of on both sides of it, I'd like to think that, or I taught my students how to think critically. And yet there is a perception that there's almost more indoctrinating going on than that critical thinking skill. And certainly that's even something that I have said about education at the lower realms and the primary, secondary stratospheres. I feel like college does a better job of that in most areas, but maybe, I mean, you know, we're both in the liberal arts. My degree's in philosophy, religion, and you've got a history degree and are, you know, all about political science. So maybe there's a different approach in the liberal arts than there is in some other areas?
Well, you know, I'm housed in an ed school, so I'm a historian of education. So I really cross over with history and social sciences. But so I'll step back and just say that, first of all, the people who are most critical of higher education and college tend to be people who either don't have a college degree or have a college degree and don't want other people to have college degrees. So one thing I hear a lot about recently is, you know, people telling, especially low income people, oh, you don't need a degree. You can go and learn a trade. There's nothing wrong with that at all, by the way, you know, but you don't need a degree. You don't need this. It's usually people with degrees telling people without degrees that they don't need one. And as someone who grew up in a family that is not well educated, that really rubs me the wrong way, because one thing that I know is that if you have more education, you're going to be healthier. You're going to make better decisions about your life. You're going to have higher finances. You're going to have a higher income. I mean, there's so much research by economists, by social scientists that shows that the more education you have, the better off your life is. And we have people who have a lot of research and are wealthy telling people who are poor with little education that they don't need any more education. So that gets under my skin. With regard to the K through 12 environment, I sent my daughter to Philadelphia public schools. And when I did that, there were many people who said things to me about doing that. I'm really glad that I did. My daughter got a great education. My daughter is incredibly open-minded. My daughter cares about other people. She has empathy. She's a great critical thinker. She wants to solve problems. She believes that she is one person in the universe and not the most important person in the universe. And I think when young people believe they're the center of the universe, that's where we run into problems. So for me, I feel like at the K through 12 level, my daughter got an amazing education. Now, are there some teachers at all levels who I think go a little overboard? Yes. Are there good teachers at all levels? Yes. Are there bad teachers at all levels? Yes. I mean, you're just going to have that. But the vast majority of teachers at all levels, I think, are some of the most amazing people. Imagine for a minute, for people who don't teach, imagine for a minute if you were a teacher in a K through 12 classroom, just how hard you have to work. And why aren't we paying those people the most money? The people who are with our children, who are teaching our children, who are making sure that our children know how to be informed citizens. Why aren't we paying them the most money? For me, that's incredibly important. It's why I have no problem paying taxes. It's why I would support the Philadelphia public schools in a heartbeat. So, yeah, I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, I think we can all agree that the whole public school system is a really difficult one to balance, and certainly teachers, and this is something that I say all the time, I could make an argument that teachers are actually some of the biggest victims of the system that we have within education, because they're beholden to impossible standards, thrown into impossible situations, and expected to perform miracles, right? Where it's just not something that's tenable for them to do. And there's a high burnout rate, and there's just a lot of difficulties that especially public school teachers face, not to mention being, as you so brought up, the pay rate is not all that competitive when you look at other jobs. These kind of folks with that kind of education. And, to be a good teacher, you have to be charismatic and passionate and all that. And a lot of times when you have a person who is all those things, they go seek something else, something other. And it's a shame, because I think being a teacher used to be regarded in a different way than it is currently. Mm-hmm. And that's a shame. I mean, I know in working with a lot of public school districts that they're having a tough time staffing. They're having a tough time getting the highest quality folks always to the front lines and keeping them there. So that's a big issue. Mm-hmm. But so to your point about the things that get under your skin when people talk about the education system and all that. So why do you think, though, that so many people, so many students who are coming directly from that system feel so disenchanted, disenfranchised with the experience that they just had? Then that's not just from the K through 12 education. That is from a lot of college students as well. I do think the internet probably has something to play a part in that. And yet those folks who haven't experienced the full gambit of a higher education, there's really something to be said for being in a classroom and being challenged and being presented with ideas in such a way that you would not ever get or experience if you're just doing research on your own or just on the internet or reading a book with and by yourself. That there is something to be said for that dialogue that happens within a classroom and being, again, challenged by other individuals, not just the teacher, but your students as well. And so I think that people kind of miss out on that experience, and you really, really, I think, tend to learn in a much different way when you're within that sort of experience. So that was a lot of different things right there, but I wanted to catch everything that you had mentioned.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is that according to research, nearly 75% of college students are satisfied with their college experience. So that's a huge level of satisfaction. I think that what happens is that the media, social media, craft these narratives about student satisfaction that are inaccurate and there's no data behind them. So for me, as a researcher, I'm always going to look at the data, and the data says that it's nearly 75% of college students. Now, are there going to be college students that aren't satisfied? Absolutely. I mean, you're not going to see a lot of them on graduation day because the people graduating are typically very satisfied. Maybe they don't like certain classes. Maybe they didn't like this or that experience. I mean, I can't say that I liked every class.
Yeah, we all have that, right?
But yeah, but by and large, people are satisfied. What's happening is that you have people who I think, quite frankly, would prefer that a whole group of society just stay as low down as possible and not gain critical thinking skills and not gain the intellectual advantage as we move forward. And I think that's why they're crafting that narrative. I think most students are very satisfied. I've worked across 3 different universities. I've been the PhD advisor for almost 100 doc students, and I've had undergrads and I've had graduate students, over the years, thousands of them. I can tell you, because I am in touch with so many of them, I still write letters for people I was a professor for 25 years ago. I'm in touch with them. I know what their lives are. Social media does allow you to do that. And they're incredibly grateful for their college experience. They had a wonderful time. Did they have ups and downs? Yes. But I think a lot of times there are just people out there who really don't want to see the whole country educated. They don't want everyone to be a critical thinker. They don't want everyone to be someone who is practicing in democracy. And I think that's really sad, because that's the most beautiful thing that we can give people, is the ability to advocate for themselves and to think critically about what they need in their lives. I once wrote this article related to like 3 generations of women, and it was about me, my mother, and my daughter. And one of the things I said is that within a generation, I was able to move my family out of poverty. So I grew up in immense poverty, on a Pell Grant, on public assistance, went to Head Start, all of those kinds of things. And with all of those government support programs, which I am a complete advocate for, and by the way, each of my parents worked 2 jobs. So it wasn't like they weren't working. They were working 2 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. So basically, by going to college on a Pell Grant, getting student loans, all of those things, I was able to ensure that my daughter, I paid full tuition. I paid full cash for my daughter to go to college. And I don't resent that in any way, because more than likely what I paid helped somebody else, just like how someone helped me. I think like we really have to understand that we're connected, and that when we help people to be their best selves, we all benefit. Like we all end up benefiting, because guess what? Now my family isn't using public assistance. Right? We're all fine, and we're paying into the tax base. And I think people need to understand that more than they do.
Certainly, the more a society is educated, the better off we all are. The question is what's the proper way to go about education itself? And do you think, I'm putting words into your mouth, but basically that there's a concerted effort out there to ensure that maybe not everyone is as educated as they should be? Do you think that's malicious, or do you think that just sort of happened by the by, or?
Well, I read the entire Project 2025 document, so I think that there are some efforts, and there always have been efforts. I mean, I'm a historian, right? So let's say, for example, I'll just give you an example of something. So after the Civil War, when you had all of these formerly enslaved African Americans, formerly enslaved people who were out in society, there were groups of people who wanted to just give them enough education to be semi-skilled so that they could be semi-skilled workers for their companies. There was a whole group of people, industrial philanthropists like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, Baldwin. They all wanted to just give Black people just enough education, but not too much. Don't give them a liberal arts education. Right? Because that's where you really learn how to think. So that was a concentrated effort. That was an agreement among the wealthy industrialists. So if that happened then, and it's highly documented, there are many, many books about this. I've written extensively about it. There are many other people before me. Who's saying that can't happen again, right? So, today I saw an article that said it was encouraging people to get like trades positions because AI was going to take all of the high-level thinking jobs. Well, guess what? There are going to be people who have college degrees who are going to be working with AI in those high-level thinking positions. So why are you pushing people into another section? Give people the choice. Don't push people in one way or the other. I think what you do is we prepare people, we give them opportunity, we teach them, and then they get to decide. We live in a country where we're not supposed to be tracking people. We're not supposed to be deciding what people do based on how much money they have in their family. What we're supposed to be doing is giving people opportunity so that they can make a decision. When I was a young girl, my guidance counselor told my parents that I would make a nice secretary, okay? And they had me take typing classes. I'm still a really fast typist. And they wanted me to be a secretary because I'm from a low-income family. But I was really lucky because a teacher took me aside and told me, no, you're college material, and help me fill out the FAFSA, help me to apply to college, recommended some colleges for me. That changed my whole life. He didn't believe that I was destined for one area because, I grew up poor. Now, I know lots of people who are in trades, and I think that's a great thing to do if it's your choice. And just like I think if you don't want to go to college, that's your choice. But this whole idea of telling people, and yeah, I do think that there are efforts to ensure that certain groups are not as well educated. I do think that. I think we care very little about people who are poor in the U.S.
So I was just going to ask, now, do you think that's a socioeconomic demographic, or do you think that a particular race or ethnicity, or?
Both. Yeah, I think that it is definitely racial. And I definitely think that there are some parts of it that are gendered. And there are other parts of it that are based on socioeconomic status. And I wish that we believed that everyone had opportunity and that everyone should be given opportunity. But I don't see us as a society more than ever right now. I do not see us feeling that way. I don't see us wanting the best for everyone. And we should, because we all benefit when people excel. We all benefit when others excel. And I think for too long, we've been acting in this way where we think, like, for example, if you benefit, then I'm losing. I'm not losing if you benefit. Nothing's being taken away from me because you benefit. You know what? In fact, my life might even be better if you benefit, because you might be happier. And if you're in my orbit, then I'm not going to have to deal with your unhappiness.
Right.
I believe that we should be more generous as a society. I believe we should be better to each other. And if each of us did that, I think that we would be in a much better situation. I think right now we're living in an incredibly hateful world. And I hope that changes. I really sincerely hope that changes. And I believe that it can change because I am an optimist.
And we'll have more of our conversation with Marybeth Gasman, a distinguished professor at Rutgers University, on our next episode of Educate Everyone. And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. One of the most valuable skills a student can learn is how to advocate for themselves. Start small. Encourage your student to email their teacher when they have a question, or practice how to ask for help in person. Role play it at home with them. It builds confidence, communication skills, and shows them how to have a voice, even in the classroom. You won't always be there to speak up for them, so help them find their own words now. And that's the Middle Tree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, we've been talking about the ideas that comprise this book in general. So before we go forward, let's take a step back. I want to remind everybody about the impetus for this project to begin. What got you going on it?
So what I really became interested in doing was understanding why we kind of have the consciousness that we do. We've talked a number of times about, within these segments, about that human beings actually sort of have and had and continue to have a choice to construct our mental capacities and the consciousness that comes out of those in a very particular way. My sort of thesis running throughout this whole project, in fact, was that we've made a particular choice, largely implementing an unknown element that I've been intentionally very coy about naming exactly up to this point, because it's framed us in such a way that it's something that we implement at every stage of our conscious experience, and we're simply not aware of not only what it is, but the mechanisms there. It's penetrated us so deeply that we don't even really know that it exists. So I thought, to kind of frame it in this performative sort of manner, I said, well, there's something that takes us as human beings in some way out of alignment from the things that we're constantly seeking. And that we're seeking anything to begin with should be a sign within us that something is out of alignment. We've talked previously about how cats don't question what it is to be a cat. Trees just grow in accordance to their genus and to their environment and all that. Human beings are a complete and total enigma, mystery, wild goose chase frequently in the way that we conduct our lives and how we go about understanding who we are. So given that is the case, I thought we really, I think, need to go back and examine not only the kind of consciousness that we have, but what that allows for, what that keeps us from. And I think we need to question whether or not we can or should change it. And so that's sort of what sparked this project. And it was also coming out of my dissertation, where I was very much told, you can't write about the things you want to write about necessarily in this regard. We've got to focus on, the work of previous folks within the field and build off of those things. And I wanted to forge my own way and create something of my own philosophy, to be honest with you, I guess. Although that wasn't really the intention per se, I suppose. But I wanted to look at, discover, think about, examine things that I didn't see a whole lot of other, not only philosophers or theologians do, but people do in general, not just in academic fields, but I suppose just generally, something we don't talk about. Why do we have the kind of consciousness that we do? So I've identified, and again, this is where this is performative, I've identified a quote unquote enemy to it that is kind of latched on to our consciousness and become a part of what we are. And so we're going to start talking about exactly what that is, why it's dangerous, why it has so deeply latched into the dregs of our very beings, and how that affects us in ways both positive and negative. So, and even that we, again, just don't really have a modality by which to operate with outside of this element of this thing that I've labeled as something that is performative, as an enemy. So I'll be anxious to get to and talk about exactly what that is here shortly.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.